Thank you for joining me here today. We are here to talk about, the esports betting platform, the Rivalry, and even about the esports betting in general. So thank you for joining me here today. And we can kick off this interview with the explanation. How did you actually end up co-founding the esports betting platform, and what is like to be in the industry now when it's growing so fast?
Yeah, so when I was younger, I definitely played a lot of games. I was in some ways, semi-pro in a few titles with my brother where we were extremely competitive in the games that we played, but there was really no such thing as esports back then and in the way that it exists now. And then, professionally, I went into the financial industry, worked in investment banking, all that kind of stuff. I got really interested in what was happening in the virtual goods marketplaces. So I continued to play games and was just really interested in CSGO skins, Dota skins, and just the massive kind of third-party marketplaces that started to exist around these virtual goods. So that was really exciting, and that was, in some ways, almost the tip of the spear of what was happening in esports back in 2014 and 15, and some of the biggest sponsors and partners were coming out of that industry. So I was excited by that. I wanted to make an investment actually in one of these marketplaces because I just thought it was a great business, and I was looking to do something different with my career. So I met these two guys, Ryan White and Kevin Wimmer, who were the co-founders of a skins marketplace called Loot Market, which at the time they were one of the larger marketplaces for Dota. They also did CSGO skins, and we were, the value proposition there is we were kind of like the transparent, legitimate, almost the equivalent of like the regulated version of a skins marketplace, because there was a lot of very dark kind of gray or black market operators of those businesses, and we wanted to be super, super clean. So that was the original philosophy. I got into that business with those guys, and we created a new company that was operating that company and then also looking to maybe invest in esports and just make other small investments in esports. And as a function of kind of our investment criteria and the things that we were most excited about in the space, esports betting was, I guess you could say, the opportunity that was most interesting for us. And at the time, there weren't really that many operators that were offering esports betting. This is like 2016, but there weren't really that many that were offering it in a way that we thought was like empathetic to the user. And there was maybe one startup at the time, and rather than invest in somebody else doing it, which was our original idea, we just decided to build it ourselves. So we kind of took our biggest investment thesis and the part of the industry that most excited us, and then ended up just building and then owning and operating completely our own version of it. So that was kind of like the genesis of it. And then in terms of the fact the industry is going so fast, it's definitely super exciting, but the way that we look at it is esports is almost just like a top of funnel to this next generation of bettor. Sports fans on average under the age of, let's say, 28, do happen to be often esports fans, potentially esports fans first. So we see ourselves as definitely like catering to the esports betting market, but also building and developing a betting product that's being kind of structured for that next generation of gambler. Our average customer is probably 10 to 15 years younger than the average customer on most other sports books. So for us, it's not just, exciting being at, call it the frontier of esports betting, but also we feel it's just like the frontier of building a overall next-gen sportsbook and next-gen betting product in general. And it just happens to be kind of led from the front by esports. So yeah, it's a super exciting time.
Exactly. You could not say it better, because actually it's so funny, for people who are involved directly in the esports, that kind of like underestimation of the esports, maybe from the 2016, 2017, or even 18, it's kind of funny, right? That how, people were, highly underestimating the esports, and the COVID-19 only accelerate everything. And now everyone is trying to, to take a piece in the pie. But
For sure.
The running gambling company of any type can quickly become a regulatory nightmare, and I know you surely know something about that. So how do you balance it? How do you balance the regulatory requirements with actually notoriously impatient millennials and the Gen Zs?
Yeah, the hardest part for sure is at least from a friction perspective, is the onboarding process, because you have a generation that, some of them have definitely bet before, but there's a few of them that haven't. And I guess you could say the onboarding experience that they're used to having when creating like a game account or going into any kind of other B2C product experience that they've had is not as, I guess the KYC requirements are nothing compared to logging on to a sports book. So what we had to do is we worked a lot with the regulator in the Isle of Man. We worked super closely with them, and they were great in working with us to, I guess, parse out the onboarding experience in a way where we're still collecting all the required KYC that we need to be completely fulfilling all of our obligations in the Isle of Man. But rather than kind of dumping almost like a spreadsheet or a form in front of their face, which is typically what you get in an onboard process, it's just, a complete KYC form, and it's not really that appealing. They kind of allowed us to parse out the steps that a user will proceed through in the flow, where up until the point that they place their first bet, they can kind of register, experience a bit more of the site than before they registered. Then they can provide, their full name and date of birth. They can experience a bit more of the site. And then once they provide their KYC, then they can fully, deposit bet and do everything. So rather than just kind of plopping something in front of their face right at the beginning, getting them to fill in a whole almost medical form, we have a very kind of soft onboarding experience that significantly reduces the friction. And it took us a really long time to develop it in a way where the conversion rates and everything we were looking for, we were starting to achieve. So that was definitely like a really big part of it. And then I'd say like it's just the limits that we have also are somewhat lower. So, the average deposit size and bet sizes from this kind of bettor is significantly lower. So in terms of collecting things like utility bills and going all the way up to that level, we don't really bump up against that probably as frequently as much larger sportsbooks operators do with average deposit sizes that they see. So we're able to keep the experience like relatively frictionless to the extent possible while still maintaining our regulatory obligation. And we definitely thank the Isle of Man for working with us to do that in a way where we've still been able to bring on as many users as we have and be as successful as we have.
That's great to hear, actually. The Isle of Man is really doing the great job. And I can recognize, that there's a few other esports, the betting operators who has very good, experience with them and great feedback. But, talking about legitimacy of the thing, with the Rivalry Academy, you have put very strong emphasis on education and legitimacy. So what made you to take this approach? Because to be honest, quite frankly, that actually takes, it takes a lot of effort, to do that. And, there are just few others that bother with that.
Yeah, so we're definitely trying to have an informed consumer. A lot of our customers, they are not nearly as experienced bettors just by virtue of their age and overall experience as somebody in their late 30s or early 40s, which is around the average age on traditional sports books. So we definitely felt we had an obligation to educate, especially in something like betting. I mean, at the end of the day, there still is the potential for negative behavioral trends, and you still need to be hyper aware of responsible gambling and everything like that. And we feel at least like our responsibility by having a customer base, which is still obviously legal, but on average younger than a traditional sports book, that our obligation to educate and really like enforce some of the rules and obligations of responsible gambling is much more so than somebody who is servicing a more mature customer. So the idea of Academy was really to do that. So instead of just these kind of loose messages throughout the onboarding experience and stuff that's buried in disclaimers, which is what you typically get, we try to make it part of almost like the brand experience of Rivalry. So even like the style of those videos, which we do offer in multiple languages depending on how you're on the site, the style is designed to represent the brand. It's still kind of playful and fun, but at the same time it's serious, and we're trying to keep you engaged and interested. Because if it was just kind of like, again, a very stale, almost regulatory type video, I don't think anybody would watch it. So we have, again, this balance of wanting to offer education and be super responsible, but still needing to entertain in some way so people actually watch the video. Otherwise, they're going to have absolutely no interest. So it's kind of that mix. And then definitely, so we put into people's heads, just so there's something, again, in the back of their mind when they're betting, to be cognizant of any perceived negative behavioral trends or anything that might be heading them down a path that probably takes them away from the experience we're trying to create, which is just something that's entertaining, casual, and fun. We're not trying to produce problem gamblers at all. We definitely philosophically, in the way that we even present the brand out into the market, it's just kind of an enhancement to the entertainment of watching esports and being a fan of esports. And it's not something you should be blowing your paycheck on. It's the same as if you were to order takeout. That's maybe the most you should be spending on this kind of experience. So we're very much into putting the emphasis on that kind of thing, and the Academy just really helps us with that.
Yeah, that's true. I was mentioning 2 days ago that your content, it's educational content, but still it's made that the cool Gen Z oriented way.
Yeah.
So there's still entertainment aspect to it. And but unusually you started with esports and then added the sports. So what's the current relationship between the esports and traditional sports?
There's definitely some crossover. Like we do see a decent percentage of our customer base that's betting on esports, especially in particular markets where things like soccer are extremely popular, or football in Europe, where we do see fairly reasonable crossover between betting on esports and sports. We did have just esports on our product for I think the first year and a half, and the idea there is the community that we come out of and the type of fans that we are. Almost everyone that works for us is an esports fan. In fact, many of the people on our team we've actually like pulled out of the community. So when we launch into a new market, we will like go into that community, sometimes get some of the content creators to work for us, or people on the fan discords or some of the large internal communities will pull to work on customer support for us. So there's like that whole kind of feeling in our ecosystem that you're really working with a group of people that are from the same community and fans just like you are. So we went into this because we were just a group of software developers, engineers, and call it serial entrepreneurs that were looking to get into esports betting, not I'd say betting. And then as we got into esports betting, we realized there is that crossover, and you had to bring in the full suite of products. But then it also I'd say goes up to the first question that we talked about, where we see esports as really just a way of reimagining or being the top of funnel for a new betting experience for a next generation. So we also have just doubled down on esports because we feel if we can really like nail that product, then we found kind of market fit for a younger demo of better. And then if we can translate that into sports, we'll have something differentiated. Otherwise, we're just slapping on into our feed a new data feed from sports betting and not offering anything differentiated. So again, we feel it's just the community we come from. We're fans. It's the product we wanted to first offer. If we can nail that, then we can probably nail sports in a way that looks at least different from the experience that you get on a traditional sports book. So it's a combination of all those factors for us.
Exactly. And talking about the betting, you also will hear that you're coming up with the original the casino product, right? So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, for sure. So back to kind of our brand ethos, we try to provide things that are novel and interesting and different than what you would get elsewhere. So when we first looked at casino, again, we knew we'd have to expand to the full product suite. If you go on to Bet365, you're going to get hit with sports betting, esports betting, virtuals, live dealer, et cetera. There's a reason why you have that complete product set. And for many reasons, we will be doing the same thing. But we still want to be true to our brand and our overall business building philosophy. So when we looked at casino, we were originally just thinking of taking, an iframe from one of the large providers and then dropping in a set of games that we thought would be interesting for our user base. But we decided in the end actually to build our own games and offer original IP first to our customer base, just to do something really different, and then start to layer in probably some other third-party providers' games. So we were just looking for games that we felt our users would want, and even stuff that we wanted to play that just didn't exist. So we just had to build it ourselves. And this has kind of been the story of Rivalry for the last 3 years, I'd say, is that we've come into this a lot. So this particular casino game, what we've noticed, at least again with the younger demographic, is they want more agency in the experience. And I'm sure anyone that runs any B2C business for Gen Z would say the same thing. They want to have more agency and more control. So when we looked at something like virtual horse racing, it is exciting. We'll probably have a product like that. But in virtual horse racing, you are betting on a virtual horse. So in our game and what we've developed, you yourself are the horse. So when you enter our casino game, it's a multiplayer casino game. You play with, a dozen or 24 other users that are on the site. Your username, because we've got this whole kind of internal system where our users create almost gamer tags that are internal to Rivalry. So when you enter our casino game, you'll actually be populated into the game and you'll see your username populated on screen. It's kind of like a racing game, almost like a Mario Kart type tower defense game where you're proceeding down a track. It's a relatively quick race. It's with 10, 20, 30 other people. You can roll over some power-ups that will interact with either yourself, making you move faster or whatever it may be, or even interact with an opposing player, bouncing them off or, pushing them further back or whatever, whatever may happen. It's fully rendered in Unity, which is one of the big game engines. So it looks like a video game. And there's like a winner screen, there's a live chat component. So one of the things we found, again, that this demographic likes is they want to be able to shit talk, I guess you could say. So we have a live chat component on the side as well. And then, we run an unlimited number of these instances and the game will keep rolling and rolling. So it still has that instant gratification of a casino product mechanically. And then also, going through all the third-party testing, fully regulated, provably fair, all that kind of stuff. But then we mix it with a lot more agency in the experience, a live chat kind of interactive component. There's like a winner screen. And that's the first game that we have. A big part of it as well is it's kind of kicking off this whole lore that we're developing. So all of our casino games, at least that we're originally developing, will kind of exist in like the lore of our site. So the same as there's gamer lore in any of the major multiplayer games that you play. If you think about a World of Warcraft and the Blizzard lore, which is incredible. And we're doing something similar where there's going to be kind of a storyline to the game. You're going to participate in an ecosystem or a world where, as more games that we create get slotted in, it will all kind of make sense and be part of the same overall aesthetic and story. So that's another component of it. And then the overarching thesis is this whole thing we've made up, but we just call it MMOGG. So you have massively multiplayer online gambling games, the same as you have MMORPG, which is massively multiplayer online role-playing games. So it's our spin on it for gambling. So again, these multiplayer gambling experiences where there's some depth and lore, there's agency, you see yourself kind of passively participating in the game, you have a live chat. So that's the first experience, I guess, casino experience that we're offering to the market, and we think will be super differentiated, and we're going to continue to create games like that.
Yeah, that sounds really super exciting. And to be honest with you, as you already mentioned, like we have a lot of discussions with even the leaders in the casino industry, and they all mentioning the same thing. The product, the casino product, which gonna be interesting for the future generation, has to have that skill aspect, has to can be a kind of community aspect, and it has to have the actually. Not to be passive, the players has to be, engaged in the game and not just passively playing, and praying to be lucky, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have a system called Quest, which does integrate with this casino game, where Quest is the system where you create your username and everything like that on the site Rivalry. In Quest, again, we were looking at, we needed some kind of VIP program, the same as you would find on any traditional sports book. We didn't find one that was designed mechanically in a way that we thought would be remotely interesting, at least for our users. So we developed our own called Quest. And again, the outcome and the goals of it are the same. It's a retention product in many ways, as most VIP programs are, but we've just reskinned it, called it Quest. It's like a role-playing game that kind of sits on top of the site Rivalry. So as you proceed through the site and you're watching educational videos, you're betting, you're depositing, you're reading articles, whatever it may be, there's a kind of little tag that appears dynamically throughout the site, depending on the quest you're completing, and you're aware that you're completing this quest on the site. There's a fully animated experience bar. You level up your character on the site. So yeah, we try to add that little spin of agency on everything that we do, and it's just flowing through the entire product.
Very cool. But I find also another the trend or the aspect of your website very interesting, and that's actually the betting, the streamer betting.
Yep.
And you have it a separate section on your site. So I guess it's pretty the fast growing the bits of your site. So can you tell us a bit more about that, because I find it very interesting. Not just esports betting, but also the streamer betting.
For sure. So streamer betting is popular streamers in all of our key markets will be populated onto streamer betting, and then it's hyper contextual betting on a live streamer. So, if someone's playing Fortnite, will they get a headshot in the next 60 seconds? Yes or no? These are the kinds of bets that can populate. So what we found is there was interest, obviously, in betting on esports. There's interest in betting on traditional sports, but in their free time, a lot of these customers, and they're also fans of streamers. If you actually look on an annual basis, I think a lot of people don't realize this, but if you take the total viewed gaming hours on Twitch and YouTube, call it the two biggest platforms, the biggest live streaming platform, the biggest, recorded video platform, plus YouTube Live, less than 5% or about 5% of those total hours is esports. 95% of it is just casual entertainment, watching streamers. That is the much bigger segment of this overall industry. So what we found is most, if not all, esports fans will also have a collection of streamers they'd like to watch. And sometimes it's actually just a pro player who in their off time is streaming. So it gave us the ability to tackle kind of that segment, which again, as an entertainment category and hours watched is much bigger than the core of esports. So that was one of the ideas of wanting to bring it on. And it's used, I'd say, almost more like a casino product. So it's less of a fixed odds bet behaviorally where someone's coming in and putting, $20-25 on Astralis to win in a CS match. They're watching their favorite streamer. They're going to be watching them anyways for, let's say, the next hour. They'll have a $5 bankroll that they kind of mentally have, and then they'll just put 25-50 cents bets on just kind of little random activities that are being offered to bet on while watching their favorite streamer. So yeah, it was again this idea we have of like pairing entertainment with betting in a more of a casual format. So that was the idea behind that product, and it's been working well for us.
Yeah, actually, as we are talking through all this interview, that there's again added that entertainment value, right? So, but as we are talking about, the Rivalry is a prime example of the brand which has been built on the content and the community. I mean, that's clear. So, with the company embracing the concept of becoming kind of media creator in its own right, do you think that this is the future of the marketing and the branding in general?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I can point to any number of brands that aren't even embedding that are targeting a very similar demographic to ours, that are marketing and advertising in a way that is distinctly different from the way that anyone would previously have done it. So as for like a betting example, if you look at what's happening in the US, you've got a very popular example, but you have Barstools and Penn, and you've got Dave Portnoy, who's the face of the Barstools brand. And then you have DraftKings, who is extremely capitalized in going after that market. So I think DraftKings just reported their quarter, and they had 200 million US in marketing spend just in a single quarter, which is massive. And you've got Dave Portnoy, Barstools, and Penn, where the leverage of their brand, which is definitely, call it a under 30 traditional sports fan, that they are kind of the box on as a media company. Their individual influencers and creators and personalities that they've created within that brand can send a single tweet telling you to go register and bet on X or Y game, and the volume of people that will do that is absolutely massive. Like the leverage they have in that is huge. And some of the numbers came out from their first weekend in, I think, Pennsylvania or wherever their first license is. And I would assume that Dave Portnoy and these individual creators can send a single tweet that will generate a number of FTDs that, let's say, maybe DraftKings has to spend $1 million to acquire, quite literally. So for us, it's the same, where this old style of marketing, trying to be the primary sponsor on the Man U jersey or whatever it may be, that's just not fundamentally working with this demographic. So, you have to have a community resonance that's different. You have to have, interactive personalities that people are familiar with within your company. So definitely for us, it's like a massive part of our overarching just company story, and then also acquisition strategy. Yeah, it's an absolute must now. I mean, every B2C brand targeting a Gen Z customer is also a media company now. You have no choice, in my opinion.
Exactly. I mean, we are here again that, it's just not enough to be the passive, the passively to, the stamp somewhere your logo and waiting, then the Gen Z is going to, be interested in that. So exactly, you're completely right. But, let's talk also about the demographics. Can you maybe tell us, what is the popular in a different demographics, from your experience with your side?
Yeah, like the esports that are most popular?
Yeah, the esports, definitely.
Yeah, I'd say for us, it's more geography rather than demographic. Maybe League of Legends skews like slightly younger than, let's say, CS:GO. I think if you even just look at the viewership metrics, League of Legends as a title skews a little bit younger than some of those other games. Not by much, maybe 1 to 2 years, but it's geography. So, for example, South America is a market that we operate in legally from our Isle of Man license, at least in the countries. There's a couple countries in South America we can't operate in. So Brazil being one of them, and let's say Mexico being another. In Brazil, Counter-Strike is pretty much religious. It's been like that for a very, very long time. Some of the biggest brands and teams in the world are based out of Brazil. So we definitely find a disproportionate amount of interest in CSGO out of Brazil versus in Mexico. There's almost no CSGO culture. I'm sure it exists, but nothing even remotely compared to Brazil. So in Mexico, you've got more of a League of Legends culture in terms of which esports are popular. So the way that we create our social and content strategy, then we'll start to mimic that. So we have like individual social properties in Portuguese that are targeted specifically to individual titles. And then we've got individual social properties in Spanish that are specifically targeted to specific titles in Mexico. So for us, we we kind of wrap ourselves around the games and titles that are popular on a country by country basis, I'd say, rather than a demographic play that where, you know, a particular demographic across all countries watches the same thing. It's very geo-based versus demographic-based.
And from the geo base, like where is the, you know, the majority, the bets coming from?
For us?
Yes.
Yeah, we definitely probably do 2/3 of our business in South America as a region. And then I'd say the other third is a mix of, let's say, CIS region, you know, mostly Russia, Ukraine, and then a few countries in Europe where they haven't yet regulated and where we can still legally accept customers. So that's for the first, I'd say, 2 years or 2.5 years, which is how long we've been operating. That's been our current core focus and where we found a lot of success just in general, for sure. And then we are now starting to pick off and expand into regulated markets. So we chose to launch with an Isle of Man license just because, you know, esports viewership and interest in betting just happens to come out of a lot of gray markets in addition to the regulated markets. And as a startup, it is way easier to show case studies of success in having multiple markets you can access versus just going after a single saturated regulated market. So we started with Isle of Man, and we are now definitely in the process of concurrently making our way through multiple country-specific licenses where we, through 2021, will have probably a pretty even mix of regulated markets with our gray markets. And the regulated markets are, you know, maybe I think one in Europe and then a few elsewhere in the world. So yeah, we're starting to build a bit more of a diverse, I guess, geographic operating structure, mixing gray with regulated.
Excellent. And you know, my very, very last question is, so where do you see actually the esports in betting, like let's say 3-5 years? Do you think we will see rapid growth continue, or do you see any disruptive development in the near future?
No, I think even if you listen to what some of the European sports books have said on their earnings calls, and then DraftKings in their post-COVID quarter, where, you know, definitely they saw a huge uptick in esports like everybody else did. But I think everyone could see there was a line of sight from that interest that showed, you know, directionally where it was going, which is where it's been going for the last couple of years, where it continues to be one of the fastest growing betting categories in online gambling. And I think a few of the European sports books expect it to be their second largest betting category next to soccer. I don't think it's going to dislodge soccer betting. And I'm not sure what the number is, but I think more than 2/3 of all online turnover is still soccer. Esports is not going to get anywhere near that for quite some time, but I do expect it will be probably the second largest betting category in 5 to 10 years from now is my expectation. And then you hear this echoed by the companies that are more on the periphery, where some of the tournament organizers, even I think the CEO of NVIDIA even talked about it, just the graphics card provider, where, you know, the expectation is, again, second only to soccer, esports will become the most viewed sport in 5 to 10 years as well. And then there's just that correlation between betting and viewership. So as much as the viewership is growing, so is the betting. So I think every stakeholder kind of sees where this is heading, and it's going to probably be the second largest sport and the second most bet on sport within 5 to 10 years is our expectation. And it's also just like the generational churn, you could say, in some ways, where, you know, the average fan and bettor in esports is much younger. So it's just that next wave of customer in any product, really. So there's also just like the organic churn of an older bettor and an older demographic watching more of the traditional sports, which is just not going to be there as much as the massive wave of Gen Z that's coming in. You know, Gen Z is the largest population group on the planet now. So yeah, the sky's the limit, I think, for it, for sure.
Exactly. And we were talking about, you know, the viewership, but what do you actually expect to, or what is your prediction when it comes to actually like esports B2B ecosystem? Because we know that, you know, at the moment it's mostly about like, you know, the fundings, and it's massive, but it's at this stage it's mostly about the fundings and the partnerships, you know, and the investing. Yeah. So where do you actually see it to grow? Because, you know, we can see, you know, we're covering at IO News, you know, it's massive. And in last 2 years, the investment that were in esports are actually really incredible. So where do you actually see it in the next 3-5 years? But when you know, those all companies should, you know, to grow, and all ecosystems should be created, right?
Yeah, I think investors are starting to learn a lot better of how to pick their spots in the industry. There was probably a disproportionate amount of funding into the esports organizations, for example, over the last couple of years, and people somewhat ignored all the other opportunities. Now, as that cycle has kind of made its way through, people are starting to look elsewhere in the ecosystem and realizing ways that they can participate where they may not be as impacted by the game cyclicality and the uncertainty of, you know, how the publisher is going to control an ecosystem or not, which does have a probably disproportionate impact to esports organizations over other businesses. So, you know, I think that the overall amount of investment into the space is going to increase over the next 3 to 5 years, but I expect it to look a lot more diversified. If you look at like a typical venture capital segment, for example, think of any, you know, let's say fintech. People say fintech very broadly, but then fintech, you know, the map of all the different companies and how they segment into the ecosystem is enormous. Whereas if you think about esports and esports betting, you have a similar map where there's tons of different participants, but definitely right now all the capital is being like funneled into teams and franchises. I just think over the next 3 to 5 years, the map is going to like broaden where the teams aren't going to take the bulk of the capital. It's going to be spread out a lot more evenly in a lot of different places. So at a general level, I'd say that if we're going to talk specific to betting, my expectation is there will be consolidation over the next 3 to 5 years where a lot of the smaller operators might band together, you know, ones that have a particular license in one market banding together with another. And then you'll definitely see some of the conglomerate larger operators, whether it's like Flutter, GVC, whoever, there will be acquisitions in the space because inevitably they are seeing that even though the fundamentals may not be there because the size of these companies are still small relative to what they do, they know they have a top of funnel and a pulse on the community that is almost impossible to replicate. So I do expect there's going to be a fairly significant amount of M&A in the next 3 to 5 years on the gambling side, where some of the bigger brands in the space might be housed in like a larger parent company that's providing more of that regulatory infrastructure support, which is something that is time-based, not capital. You know, for us, for example, to get all the licenses that, let's say, GVC has, which I think is more than 20, you know, it would just take us a very, very long time. We can't fast forward that. So there will be on the gambling side, I think, M&A, and then elsewhere in the ecosystem, just a spreading out of the allocation of capital throughout the esports ecosystem.
Exactly. You know, you could not say it better, and it's very true. And you know, Steven, thank you so much for your time and your opinion and insights. I think it was very interesting, and it would be and you know, the readers will find it very interesting because, you know, definitely it's the esports is a hot topic, you know, and a lot of people actually, even from the traditional, you know, the casino and the sport betting play, you know, the places are looking to get more and to educate themselves about the esports, because, you know, we are all learning when it comes to the esports. So thank you.
Sure. So much. Yeah, thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.